what's up, guys? Welcome to LP Tremors, where we talk all things violent horror. Joined again by Peter Jones. How's it going, brother?
Hello, Tyler. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Another
Today,
episode.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. We are on episode 6 of what is and what will be a full Iron Maiden studio discography, going from the debut 1980 all the way to 2021's Senjutsu. And today, since it is the 6th episode, we are going to be talking about Iron Maiden with Somewhere in Time. Coming out in 1986, same exact lineup, Hallelujah, produced by Martin Birch, as always. And we also got Bruce Dickinson, Adrian Smith, Steve Harris, Dave Murray, and Nico McBrain. Literally no change since Peace of Mind as of right now. And yeah, so Somewhere in Time coming out in 1986. This is just coming after the gigantic World Slavery Tour. The band was absolutely burnt out, absolutely exhausted. No writing credits from Bruce Dickinson at all.
Nope.
The only contribution Bruce Dickinson had is honestly vocals, because he didn't write a single song off of this record.
That they accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Peter, you might have hinted at it. So there might be a little bit of turmoil going on, behind the scenes. Tension started to fill up, maybe some egos here and there. But yeah, this is Somewhere in Time. Band is very burnt out after World Slavery Tour. I mean, I can't really blame them. But yeah, we're gonna go over our full thoughts over Somewhere in Time. Peter, I'll send it over to you.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah. So another interesting thing about this is that this is the longest period of time between studio albums in their career to date. 2 full years now have gone by. It was September 84 to September of 86. That's a long time to wait for a new record. Granted, they were on tour the whole time, but if you saw them and your time was over and you're waiting for a new album, that's a long time to wait.
Oh yeah.
So following the Slavery World Tour, as you said, they were pretty cooked, but I think not all were as cooked as others.
No.
Bruce specifically was ready for pretty much the loony bin.
Right.
There were several times even during the tour that he was just like, why are we doing this? Was kind of out of his mind.
Right.
And as we hinted here, he did offer some songs for the writing on this, but the stories are that they were more of an acoustic feel or flair to them.
Right.
And they were just pretty much rejected out of hand. And Steve has made comments like he just, Bruce doesn't get it, and he said, well, he probably was more burnt out. Probably? Sorry. The singer, after 187 shows, 331 days, whatever it was, like I said, is ready to be committed.
Oh,
the wear on a singer is 10 times what it is on anybody else.
Amen.
And so we can understand that. However, this is the album where Adrian Smith really starts to assert himself as a composer. 3 fully formed tracks on here from Adrian.
You're right.
Dave Murray is back with a single writing credit, which is nice since Power Slave didn't have any for him. And he does have that shared credit with Steve Harris. And Harris wrote the rest of the 4 tracks himself. So the tracks are a lot longer on this than previous records. The shortest track on here is just under 5 minutes, while there are 3 tracks over 7, and one of them's over 8. This is a change from their past offerings. These are longer tracks.
Right.
Now, the time off between the end of the tour and the writing process, our guitarists started experimenting with new technologies, and it's a great time to do it. They're not doing anything, and specifically, they discovered some guitar synthesizers. And brought those into the mix, and this marks a very different sounding landscape and gives this particular album a very unique sound and a very unique flavor. So the album cover, as you said, is clearly one of their best, but it is without question the most detailed and complex of all of their album covers. It took Derek Riggs 4 months to do that, and justifiably so.
Right.
We're not going to touch it here today because it'd take us a whole extra show, but go online and look at all the notes that explain what every single one of those little messages means here and there, and the references and where they come from.
I mean, you have so many Easter eggs, front and back. You have
you
Ace's High Bar, you have Ancient Mariner's Seafood Restaurant, you have Acacia Ave. Like this, it's packed with.
You got the Ruskin Arms, you've got Ray Bradbury, you've got, I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
I saw them on March 11th, 1987 in Chicago. And to this day, I still think it's one of the best light shows and overall concerts I've ever seen. Band was in really great form. This is kind of one of their forgotten albums. According to Setlist, this is the 8th most represented album in their catalog. Even Fear of the Dark is higher than Somewhere in Time. That leads us to side one, Caught Somewhere in Time, 722 by Steve Harris. Longest length for any of the opening tracks that they've done to date, even longer than Where Eagles Dare.
Right.
And we made our comments about that. This is the 4th most represented live from the album. Right off the bat, the new sonics on here come shining through. The guitar sounds are definitely different from the very get-go.
Absolutely.
With this great harmony playing from Dave and Adrian. I also think right off the bat that the drums and the bass sound really good. They're real clean. They've got a lot of edge and power to them. It's kind of an overall feel of the album. Power Slave was a little drier. And this has a little more ambience to it, just a little more depth that may also lose a little focus. As soon as you add anything to make something a little broader, sometimes you can lose that impact of it. And Nico and Steve are very present. They sound powerful. And the changes to the guitar tones also help open up the sonic spectrum a little bit because there's not as much distortion on these guitars, which really helps the low end kind of come through a bit. And it doesn't cost them anything. And it keeps the drums right up in front. And they've got a lot of power to them.
Right.
After the intro, the opening feel changes and Bruce comes soaring right in, and right off the bat, the Maiden gallops in full form.
Oh yeah.
And Steve's thundering away underneath these great melodic guitar lines with Nico powering away over the top of it. The chorus is kind of a full-on operatic delivery from Bruce. A tight unison riff section sets up a rather extended solo section, partly contributing to its length. They're typically, one time through a verse or a chorus length. Here, each of them gets 2. So it is quite longer. Dave plays first, followed by Adrian. They reprise the dual guitar opening harmony and race to the finish. It's a powerful song, but to me, it's more suited for an inner track in the album somewhere if we're going to start talking about sequencing.
I would agree.
It's a little too long to take in from the start. Something shorter and more concise might have worked better as an opener, but in all fairness, we just said there really aren't many short ones in here to choose from.
Nope.
So the lyrics are strong, but don't have that immediate impact of the Aces High or Invaders or something like that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. Invaders, Where Eagles Dare, and Aces High all reference external conflicts. Caught Somewhere in Time is an internal, a theological journey, if you will, and some might even suggest, dare I say, spiritual. Right? Like a wolf's in sheep's clothing, you try to hide your deepest sins of all the things that you've done wrong, and I know where you belong. Time is on my side. Make you an offer you can't refuse. You've only got one soul to lose eternally. Let yourself go.
Yeah.
Different subjects, different writing. So that's the opener, and it's again a very different feel from the earlier albums, which kind of come out and punch you right straight in the nose.
Right.
Wasted Years at 506, the first of fully composed songs from Adrian Smith. It's the second most played track from the album live and starts with this iconic opening riff from Adrian Smith as the band builds to the first verse.
Yes.
It's a strong vocal from Bruce. It's got lots of power and energy, and the bass and the guitars are kind of just chunking along nicely. However, I do have to admit that I'm not a big fan of what Nico plays here.
Okay.
It doesn't groove the way I'm used to, and it causes the verses to feel a little unsettled for me. It's got that quarter note 4 on the floor feel, and there's syncopations going on around it, and that works with some bands. Cheap Trick made a living at it. Tommy Lee's done it that way for a long time, but this just didn't feel right to me, and it makes the verses feel a little boxy is the word I used, for lack of any other term. The chorus is this big sing along with backing vocals live from Adrian. And oddly, what Nico plays here works just fine. It's a subtle change, but the accompaniment is a little bit different, and now it works. Because it's basically the same beat he was doing before, but now it feels better. So the chorus feels solid. They go back to the opening intro riff and builds, and Adrian does a great solo on here. It's very classic Adrian. Another chorus with a return to the opening riff for the third final time. This was a favorite of mine when it first came out. And when I first started listening to it, I do have to admit I'm a bit burnt out on it.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem to hold the same level of excitement that it used to. That's just an honest, full disclosure on that one. So that one's track 2. Sea of Madness, 542. Again, this is the second of the 3 compositions by Adrian, and this was only played live 68 times. This begins with this frantic opening riff that carries over to the first part of the verse with these heavy punches underneath, and then Nico just going crazy over the top of it. And then what happens is it changes in the pre-chorus and chorus, where you get to the lyric, like the eagle and the dove. It's got more of a syncopated, and that feeling kind of repeats a lot throughout this album. And they use that syncopated rhythm on a lot of different songs moving forward. The opening riff comes back. They go back to the original feel, get to the second half, switch it again. I really like how it feels on the second half and through the chorus. They just kind of lockstep for me. They feel really great. The solo section feels great. The whole band's nice and tight and they're chugging along. Then they break down into this really soft, great section where Steve plays this really simple but very melodic bass line before it builds up and builds and builds and builds. And then it returns to the opening feel, final verse, final chorus. Bruce is great here, but the endless repeating of madness, of madness, of madness is a bit much. There's a great guitar outro, and too bad it's a little bit buried in the mix because there's some really stunning stuff there. So if you're listening to it next time, give it a little volume as it's fading out because it's really impressive.
Yeah.
Not my overall favorite track, as the feels kind of don't tie together and it feels like 2 completely different sections as opposed to something that works cohesively.
Okay.
Rounding out side 1, Heaven Can Wait, 724,
Yep.
Steve Harris. This is the most played song from this album live. Love the unison opening riff. The band is rocking really hard. Bruce drives things nicely. Lots of energy, lots of power. Then comes the chorus. And I'm on record here and on other shows where I've talked about Maiden, how I am not a fan of this endless repetition of choruses. Heaven can wait, heaven can wait, heaven can wait till another day. They did it 18 times.
Right.
Now, that sounds like a ton, and it is. But it's odd. In this case, it works okay for me. And
Okay.
I'll admit it works. And I'm not cringing every time Bruce sings it going, oh, please don't sing it again. It just sounds right. The back material, the way it spaces the distance, it just worked. Dave Murray fires off a great solo in this, and the band's driving really hard. Nico's also really pushing and playing some really great stuff here. Then they go into this completely different tempo change. This is something that Steve Harris latches onto and carries through for the rest of their career. They get the take my hand, they're all doing the dance while they, and of course it builds and we get to the choir, and and I think that part's cool. And the guitars change just enough underneath and it builds, and then boom, they change the tempo right back to the fast part, and off they go into the solos, Adrian's solo. There's a great unison section that bridges them together. And I love that part. Great unisection. Like I said, I love the return to the opening riff, and it's a real nice tight ending. So it's an interesting composition. Two very different parts that they again somehow put together and made into one track.
Yep.
Side 2, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, 631, Steve Harris. It appears this track was played once.
I could believe it.
Whoever got to see it live, congratulations, you have a one-off. Maybe it was a train wreck. They just wasn't what they wanted, and they just figured, screw it, put something else in.
Could be.
It's a moody intro that starts the track. I love Nico's snare punches. Just all on its kind of its own as it builds, and all of a sudden just explodes into this gallop, and Bruce just starts soaring. The chorus even ramps up the energy when Nico goes to double time and starts adding the snare on all floors. He's just driving like crazy. Adrian and Dave play a great dual part under here in the instrumental section, and Steve and Nico are in perfect sync here. They're just so tight.
Right.
It's extremely melodic, and it feels really good. I feel the section is a foreshadowing to songs that will appear on Seventh Son. It feels like it would fit there very nicely, knowing what we know now about Seventh Son. We certainly wouldn't have recognized that at the time. Bruce then comes in over the top. I've got to keep running the course, and the energy is just, oh my God, it's so good. The band is supporting, and then back to the double time, and four on the snare again into the solos. There's syncopation all over the place. Nico's not playing anything straight. Everything is just upbeats and punches and all kinds of things all over the place. Back to the original feel, another verse, double time for the chorus again. And then check out the underlying guitar parts under Bruce's singing in the chorus. It's really brilliant stuff, but it's kind of just buried in the mix a little. And I wish it was a little more prominent because it's really great stuff. They play the intro riff again, but instead of it being the moody, it's now played over the double time feel. So they bring that same exact opening riff, but now into the double time feel. And that's a great way to tie those all in together. Dual lead returns, and then those are just singing, and it's full on to the end. It's a very creative track. And I think it's one of the standouts on the album, especially creativity wise. Stranger in a Strange Land, 543. Adrian, the third most played track. Steven and Nico start with this very simple, almost Killers-like era. Nothing fancy, no flashy. And then a big fill, in it comes. It's great feel, good tempo. It's not too fast and not too slow. And the intensity feels great right up to the verse. and these big, swelling, sustaining power chords while Bruce sings. And it leaves so much space with the bass and the drums underneath it. And I love how one goes, no, no, no. And they run their strings, and it's got that with that just enough synth in there that it kind of holds like a keyboard, and it's got this real clean presence to it. And Steve and Nico are just kind of reserved here, and they just lay where they're supposed to, right in they're not getting in the way. The chorus is simple and direct. Nothing unusual about that. The second verse drives on, and Bruce is in very strong voice here, and I think he's doing a great job. And then they get to the bridge section, and the energy starts moving, because now Steve is moving. What became of the man that started? All are gone, and their souls departed. Let me hear in this place, so all alone, into the chorus. That's got nice movement, because Steve is kind of flying over the top of it. And that's a nice change from where they were. Then they break down into this really airy section with these very subtle but extremely tasteful little solos going on from Adrian, and the backing bass line from Steve. It builds, and then Adrian finishes his solo, which is really great. Another bridge and the final chorus. I think this is one of the tightest compositions. It's very well formed. It moves through its sections more traditionally than other songs on the album, and works perfectly for me. I think it works really well. Pardon me.
Yeah.
So number 3, Deja Vu. Number 3, Deja. Oops.
Yep.
I did that on purpose. 455, Mr. Murray and Steve Harris. One of 2 tracks that have never been performed live from this album.
Right.
The opening has a very similar kind of intro as Still Life from Peace of Mind. Yeah. Not surprising. It's Dave's composition, and this would have easily fit on Peace of Mind. It would have worked perfectly there.
Oh yeah.
Then it's full on with Nico playing the double time Feel Again. So that's a repeat from the couple previous tracks. And then Bruce comes in, and there was some subtle but noticeable treatment to his vocals. Yeah. It's not as clean or as direct. There's something that going on to help kind of make it a little bit bizarre. The chorus is just feel like I've been here before, feel like I've been here before. And after a while, you feel like you've been here before, but it's okay. Back to the opening dual riff, lead riff, which I like. I think that's a great riff. It's really tasty. And then right after that, Adrian and Dave go off into these great dual lines. Very tasty. And that just builds. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. There's Nico's China right there. All right, I was wrong. I'm glad I fixed that dilemma.
Yeah.
You know, and you hear the synth more on this track than any of the other tracks. It seems to have a little more presence, less guitarish, but it's kind of got something that is, if there was a separate keyboard player, they would be playing some notes underneath this. Back to the opening riff, another verse and a chorus. And Nico's playing some really tasty stuff. Lots of punches and his fast bass drum work and lots of syncopations again. Some really enjoyable stuff there. I think of all the tracks on maybe any of the albums we've reviewed so far, Steve's bass seems a little subdued in this one. It's kind of buried a bit, which is very atypical for Maiden. That I noticed it right off the bat. I'm like, where's Steve? You know, I know he's there, but he doesn't have the same kind of presence that he did on the other songs. It's a fun track, and it offers a real nice change of pace from everything that's come ahead of it. All right, Alexander the Great, 835, Mr. Harris. The only other track that's never been performed live, much to the complete frustration of Maiden fans, as this often leads all the fan polls as the most requested song to hear them play live that they've never done before. Not hard to understand why. Another closing epic. We've got Hallowed Be Thy Name, To Tame a Land, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Maidens consistently ended their albums with these huge epic pieces, you know, and at 8:35, this qualifies as epic, right?
I'd say so. Yeah.
Simply written about the life of Alexander the Great. It's a very powerful track. We get more wind, like the beginning of Power Slave. No laugh this time, just the wind. Opens the track, and we get the following spoken words: "My son, ask for thyself another kingdom, for that which I leave is too small for thee." And off they go. A very subtle, kind of a march feel underneath, and then wham, in it goes. And once it just builds and builds, and all of a sudden you're waiting for Bruce to come in, and boy, does Bruce come in. It's one of the most powerful single lines he's done to date. Near to the east, in the part of ancient Greece. You're like, okay, there's Bruce there, and just you can just see him standing up front on the monitors with one arm up in the air, and you're like, okay, back off. You know, he's blowing so much power. You're like, wow, and it just off it goes. Great drumming from Nico here, very creative and lots of tasty hi-hat patterns going on, and this just drives. It's got so much power.
Yeah.
And it's really all about Bruce. It's a pretty simple underneath accompaniment. Then they change feels, go off into this long instrumental section supported by this slower and grinding beat. Adrian's solo's first, and it's very tasty. Some of Adrian's great signature licks are all over this. Then the feel changes just enough, and here comes Dave soaring over the top, like we talked about with Power Slave and Rime of the Ancient Mariner. The combination of when Adrian goes first, followed by Dave, is sometimes real magic. And because they're so different in their styles, they return to the original feel. Bruce finishes off the first and the verse and the final chorus. It's a hugely powerful song. And they chose to play Rime of the Ancient Mariner on this tour instead of Alexander the Great. Head scratcher, maybe, at the time, but how do you leave off Mariner out of the set on the next tour? I mean, so you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, you know, because Mariner was just one of these signature tracks from the previous tour, but I would have preferred if they were going to play it, would have thrown Alexander in there at the time.
Yeah.
So that rounds out the album. This album is one of the most challenging for me to rank the tracks. They tend to kind of swim in the same waters, and there aren't real runaway standouts like the previous records. Ones that just seem to have such a higher level. And again, not that we ever said the other ones were not great. They were just not as great. They didn't stink or filler. They just weren't as strong. Many of these tracks are interchangeable, and it kind of depends on your mood when you're listening to it. But as of today, this is what I'll go with. And believe me, tomorrow this could probably change. So at 1, I've got Stranger in a Strange Land. 2, Caught Somewhere in Time. 3, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. 4, I have Deja Vu. 5, Alexander the Great. 6, Sea of Madness. 7, Wasted Years. And 8, Heaven Can Wait. And that's interesting because I have their most popular tracks as my lower tracks.
Favorite, yeah.
So while there are metal elements on here, the riffs are different. They're not a lot of great heavy lines that are repeated, like an Aces High riff or something like that you would just go, oh, riff. So today, I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10, okay.
8 out of 10 for Somewhere in Time.
Great. Great. Yeah. Killer review. Yeah. So Somewhere in Time from 1986, September of 1986. Now, when I was first listening to Iron Maiden, more so of the 80s catalog, Somewhere in Time was actually the album that was my least favorite of the 80s. And that continued for a very, very long time. Until about a couple years ago, I gained much more of an appreciation for this record. And now I can honestly say that this is my second favorite Iron Maiden record out of the 80s.
Very cool.
I like this album better than Power Slave just by a hair, but I do like Peace of Mind just a bit more. Yeah, so, and this is my third favorite Iron Maiden record.
Okay.
More on my second favorite later on, much later on. But yeah, Somewhere in Time 1986. I think this is a fantastic record. Definitely a grower for me, as I previously mentioned. And it
Right.
definitely plays out as like the redheaded stepchild of these records. This is definitely the record out of the 80s that seems to be forgotten about. You know, when you talk to an average Iron Maiden fan, they'll mention Number of the Beast, they'll mention Power Slave, they'll mention Peace of Mind, Seventh Son, even Iron Maiden. This
Right.
record seems to be the one that doesn't get talked about as much as those records. And it really is a shame because I think there is a lot of love and appreciation that should be deserved for this record. Great stuff here. And I know, and as I'm going to go forward with my review, a few of these tracks I might might sound a little harsh on, but I don't think there's really any huge stinkers on this album either. I just have some nitpicks, but other than that, I think this is a damn near perfect Iron Maiden record. So yeah, if I was going to get into the tracks, we have Caught Somewhere in Time, of course, composition by Steve Harris. And this is actually my least favorite off of this record. It clocks in 7 minutes, 22 seconds, which I think is way too long for this track. This is a track that could easily been pulled into 4 to 5 minutes tops. I don't like Bruce Dickinson on this track. I will admit that. I think he's just way too over the top on this track, especially in that chorus where he's just really reaching up there. And
Does he sound strained?
He sounds very strained. He sounds very strained to me. And you can tell Bruce is kind of burnt out. Hence what I was talking about, you know, when we first started.
Right.
So yeah, he doesn't sound all there. You know, when we heard Power Slave, you know, the record prior, I think he's really on his A game. You know, I've never heard Bruce sing anything like this before on Power Slave. This record, you can definitely tell there's something off here. And Caught Somewhere in Time is a perfect example of that. So I think Bruce really hurts this track. But other than that, I think as far as musicianship goes, you know, the dynamic between Adrian Smith and Dave Murray, I think is classic Iron Maiden. You hear a lot of, you know, suspense build up, especially in that opening riff. And again, Peter, you mentioned this perfectly. Right off the bat, you start hearing these synths, you start hearing some, well, what the hell is that? And then it goes into some gallops here and some typical Iron Maiden isms throughout the rest of this track.
Right.
But I think you said it perfectly. Steve Harris, he's very minimalist on this track. You don't hear a lot of Steve Harris isms really, but you hear a lot of galloping riffs. The musicianship is great. And overall, yeah, I think this track just goes on a little bit longer than it really should. But yeah, this is still a good track. I agree with you. I don't think this track should have opened the record, but it's fine. I just don't. Bruce just doesn't sound right to me off this track. But overall, not bad. All right, so then you get into Wasted Years. And this is, I guess you can call this the big hit off this record. This is a composition by Adrian Smith. And this is actually my favorite track off this record. Usually I don't go for the hits, but Wasted Years is actually my favorite track off this record. I love the lyrics. I think the lyrics are brilliant. It's just a track that gets everybody together. I love the chorus. The chorus is so freaking powerful. Bruce is back. I think Bruce sounds much better on Wasted Years than Caught Somewhere in Time. I love the riff. The riff, that opening iconic riff is absolutely brilliant by Adrian Smith, I believe.
Yep.
And this is actually one of the first Iron Maiden songs I ever learned on guitar. So I guess you can call this a little bit of a nostalgia track for me. But
It's all valid.
Yeah, I love this track to death. The guitar work is great. Adrian is definitely on his A game here. Bruce, again, he sounds better than ever, especially in that chorus. It's just so powerful. That vocal harmony between Adrian Smith and Bruce Dickinson is absolutely beautiful. A really tasty solo here. I love the solo from, I believe, Adrian Smith again, or Dave Murray. It's so hard to tell who's playing.
I believe it's Adrian on this one.
I believe it's Adrian as well. Yeah, but yeah, that's Wasted Years. Clocks in. What does it clock in at, Peter? 5 minutes.
5:06.
5:06. Yeah. Yeah. So that's Wasted Years. This is my favorite track off this record. It gets stuck in your head. So catchy and very sing-alongy. But yeah, that's a little bit Wasted Years. It's really no surprise this is the biggest hit off this record. You hear a lot of little different pop hooks as well, as I was kind of hinting at. Something that Iron Maiden hasn't really done since. But yeah, you hear a lot of pop hooks here and there with Wasted Years. Definitely one of the more accessible Iron Maiden tracks. But yeah, but this track, it gets stuck in my head every time, and I love this track. But yeah, that's Wasted Years. And like I said, a lot of nostalgia plays for me because this is one of the first songs I ever learned by Iron Maiden on guitar. But then you get into Sea of Madness, and this is another one of my favorites from Adrian Smith. And it opens up with this killer, almost, it's very, this riff kind of reminds me of something that could have came off Number of the Beast, actually. It's very dirty, it's very down in the dumps, but it's just very aggressive, very more of a moody type of track. But then and I think Bruce sounds very, very aggressive on this track. I think, as his vocal delivery goes, it kind of reminds me of Flash of the Blade a little bit, where he's just really singing just down and dirty. Definitely obviously not guttural, but just very menacing, I think is what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, Sea of Madness, again, I think Adrian Smith is on his A game. Adrian Smith is probably the biggest highlight off of this entire record, to be honest, because everything he's doing as far as his writing goes and his guitar work is absolutely brilliant. And it's the thing with Sea of Madness and going again with the writing, I think they're really going back to, their horror roots as well, as far as the writing goes. I see a lot of similarities as far as the songwriting goes from the first record all the way up to Number of the Beast. You hear a lot of those horror themes come out with this particular track. But as the track progresses, it's kind of plays along with the same thing like Wasted Years. You hear a lot of pop hooks, especially in that chorus. But the chorus is absolutely brilliant. Very similar to Wasted Years in a sense that it's very accessible in the chorus. Very sing-alongy, very catchy, very punchy, hooks all over the place. This is just a very accessible track, a very accessible Iron Maiden track, if you were to ask me. That's a little bit of Sea of Madness. And then you get into Heaven Can Wait. And I mentioned in previous, Iron Maiden discussions, the drinking game songs, Die With Your Boots On. Perfect example where it's just repeating the same words over and over and over again. Like you can make a drinking game out of this track. Heaven can wait, heaven can wait. Just repeating that same chorus, that same line over and over again. So it does get a little daunting, but so it's kind of like a lame chorus. It just doesn't do a whole lot for me. But the rest of the track is absolutely brilliant, I think. Bruce is back on his A game. But overall, I don't think it's doing anything too new compared to Wasted Years and Sea of Madness. It stays in that, kind of accessible route. There's hooks all over the place, galloping riffs all over the place as well. And it's really no surprise that this is another Steve Harris track because this has Steve Harris all over it. He's doing that going back to, how he was playing on Power Slave and Number of the Beast, where he's just plugging on his bass 120 miles per hour because he's just all over Heaven Can Wait throughout the entirety of this particular track. Definitely the main MVP off of Heaven Can Wait, if you were to ask me. But lyrics are definitely a little cheesy, as I was mentioning. Heaven can wait, heaven can wait. And it's just kind of, it gets a little daunting. It gets a little, come on, Bruce, come on. That's just kind of me. It's,
I agree with you.
yeah, it just gets a little. Peter, I'm glad it works for you, but for me, I don't know. It's just, come on, give me something different here. But yeah, this is just a basic track. I don't think this is a huge standout. One of my least favorite tracks off this record, but still, it's very punchy. Hooks all over the place. Solid, solid track.
Well,
But
in all fairness, it may have worked through the song, but the song was still my last choice for the album. So
yeah, true.
what does that tell you?
Yeah, there you go. And then opening up side 2 with Loneliness of the Lone Distance Runner, another Steve Harris composition. I hate the lyrics. The lyrics are just so freaking cheesy to me. um the lyrics don't do a hell of a lot for me. And this track, same thing with Cost Somewhere in Time, I think it just overstays its welcome. It's definitely a track that could have easily been edited out. 2 minutes. Bruce is singing over the top. Same, again, similar. I'm going back to Caught Somewhere in Time again. Musicianship is absolutely outstanding. I do love the airiness feel to this track. You know, it starts off with this kind of suspenseful, atmospheric tone to it, and then it just builds up, and then it goes into right into an Iron Maidenism. Those galloping riffs all over the place. But overall, this track didn't do a hell of a lot for me. Still a good track. I'm not going to skip it on my turntable or anything, but not bad. Not bad. But again, not doing a whole lot for me. Then you get into Stranger in a Strange Land. This is my second favorite track off this record. I adore this track. I it's again, I love your comparison, you know, going back to Killers, because this is a track that it really gives you like a Killers type of feel to it. Very simplistic.
Right.
It's just, it almost reminds me of like Wrathchild in a way. You know, a very simplistic riff. Steve Harris is not really doing anything particularly over the top here. He's just staying in that one tempo. And again, going back to, you know, those horror themes off of, you know, Killers or Number of the Beast. I love the lyrics. It's the lyrics are just going back to that horror theme once again. Bruce, I love Bruce's vocal delivery on Stranger in a Strange Land. You know, he sounds very eerie. He sounds very, you know, unpredictable. You don't know where he's going from. He sounds very just mysterious almost in those verses. And then I love the pre-chorus. The pre-chorus is what really sets it up. No brave new world, no brave new world. You know, I love that melody that Bruce Dickinson is delivering with that track.
Yeah, I do too.
So if I was going to take away one thing off Stranger in Strange Land, it's definitely that pre-chorus. But and then going forward, the chorus is great as well. The solo is absolutely brilliant from the dynamic between, you know, Adrian Smith and Dave Murray. I love the dynamic guitar harmonies in this track. I love the quieter tempos. You know, it goes into, you know, a quieter, more of an eerie route, you know, right in the middle of that solo, and then it builds up again. You know, it's a track that kind of goes up and down. It builds up, then it gets quieter, then it gets a little more aggressive, goes kind of back and forth.
But they do so smoothly.
They do so very smoothly. Yeah, it doesn't
There's
sound
no
robotic.
jarring,
It doesn't.
Yeah, no
it doesn't,
jarring transitions here.
Exactly. Yeah, it fits very well. You know, it's not really. It doesn't sound to the point where it feels out of place. It's a very tight track, and I think you mentioned that, Peter. It's probably one of the tightest tracks off of this record. So yeah, there you go. That's a little bit of Stranger in Strange Land. You're getting a little bit of those poppy hooks as well, like you are in, you know, Wasted Years and Sea of Madness. But I appreciate this a lot. I like this track a lot. It's my second favorite track off this record. And then you get into Deja Vu. And again, this is actually one of my favorites as well. Lyrics are a little cheesy.
That's okay.
They're definitely a little cheesy, but you know, especially in the early days, they are known for some few cheesy lines here and there. But again, horror themes all over the place on this track. Bruce, he's going back to that, menacing type of tone as far as his vocal delivery goes. He sounds much more aggressive on this track than Sea of Madness, actually. He sounds very, this really, really is reminiscent to a track like Flash of the Blade, where he's going for that really, really, really down and dirty type of tone. And then he just explodes into Bruce Dickinson being Bruce Dickinson in that chorus.
Yeah,
Feel
they're
like
huge.
I've been here before. He's really
Right.
like reaching up for the stars on that chorus.
Yeah, huge
Yeah.
vocals from
Huge
him.
vocals. Huge vocals. But yeah, this is just like, it's another very tight Iron Maiden track. But overall, this is definitely one of my favorites. The lyrics, again, they're a little cheesy, but it's very tight and it does get stuck in my head quite a bit. Very punchy, hooks all over the place. Yeah, so that's a little bit of Deja Vu. And then you get into the quote unquote epic Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great, I think, is such an underrated masterpiece of a track. I love this track to death. Um, I I think everything they were trying to do on Caught Somewhere in Time, they did much better with Alexander the Great, because it's a little reminiscent to Caught Somewhere in Time, but I think they just do it a hell of a lot better on Alexander the Great. Almost something, as far as kind of going back to history lesson Iron Maiden,
Right.
something that could have easily just they could have easily pulled off a Power Slave almost. As far as the theme with this particular track, it's again talking about Alexander the Great. But yeah, I and of course this has Harris written all over this track. It's you really these Harris tracks, it's Harris when you hear it. As far as songwriting goes, as far as song length definitely goes, it's a Steve Harris track. It does get a little repetitive at times here and there, but overall, this is what, an 8 minute and change track, 8.5 minutes, and I don't think this track overstays its welcome at all. I don't get exhausted by the end of this track,
Mhm.
and I go back to this track quite a bit off this record. The musicianship is absolutely outstanding. It's great. It's you can't even describe it. It's one of those tracks where you need to experience for yourself.
And it's clearly the most prominent Harris is on the album.
Clearly, oh yeah, screams Steve Harris all the way
Right.
through. And this is very, very reminiscent to, almost reminds me like a mix of something that could have came off Power Slave and a mix of something that they could have done in later records. Like almost kind of gives me like a Brave New World type of feel.
Hmm.
Just a little bit, just a smidge of what they're going to be going for in later records. But overall, fantastic track from Steve Harris. Great stuff here. And so yeah, that is my little review over Somewhere in Time. Fantastic record, my second favorite out of the 80s catalog. And if I was to rank these tracks, I'm going to go from favorite to least favorite. I got Wasted Years as my number one, Stranger in a Strange Land at 2, Sea of Madness at 3, Deja Vu at 4, Alexander the Great at 5, Heaven Can Wait at 6, Loneliness of the Lone Distance Runner at 7, and I got Caught Somewhere in Time at 8 as my least favorite. But all these tracks, there's really not any stinkers and just some nitpicks here and there. But yeah, fantastic record, all the way through. There's not much you can really say that's negative, but you can tell there's some exhausting moments, especially coming from Bruce Dickinson, where he's just kind of there, and he's kind of, you can tell Bruce is getting burnt out, just a little bit, but he still sounds like Bruce. There's nothing really offensive here, as I was saying. He still has, this is just a great, fantastic record all the way through. I gave Power Slave a 9.5 out of 10. And I mentioned I do like this album just a bit more than Power Slave. And I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to give this record a 9.7 out of 10. Fantastic record all the way through. I do play this one quite a bit. My third favorite Iron Maiden record. We'll get to my second favorite in future videos. But yeah, what else can be said? Great, fantastic record. Badass artwork. We definitely brushed on that a little bit, but yeah, awesome stuff here. You're not going to go wrong with this record. So yeah, that is our full review off of Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time, coming out September of 1986. Brilliant record. I adore this record to death. Peter, is there anything you want to add or anything you might have missed?
Love all of your comments. Your insight was great. And I enjoy listening to somebody with a different opinion.
It's great. That's why we do
so
this.
Much fun because I mean, such different experiences over the same records.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that kind of holds this album down a bit is that in history, it's also the album that was not presented. And what I mean by that, it wasn't marketed the same way the previous records were.
Right.
Starting with Live After Death, which I believe was the first long play VHS concert that was made.
Well, yeah.
In the industry. So we have a video for that. We have a Made in England from Seventh Son. Yeah. We've got videos from later tours. They get to the later years, they do a video for every tour.
Right.
There is no concert video for Somewhere in Time.
Right.
And that can have an impact.
Yeah, it definitely played as, like the redheaded stepchild off these records. This is still hailed as a classic Iron Maiden records, but
and it should be.
Yeah, and it should be, but you're looking at records like the debut Iron Maiden, Killers, Number of the Beast, Seventh Son, Power Slave. It kind of gets forgotten, as in those, the what people would hail as the classic Iron Maiden records. And it's a shame because there is a lot of love that goes into this record. There's a lot of stuff to appreciate with this record.
Yeah, and as we said when we started, of their first 8 albums, which will include No Prayer for the Dying, as we said, this is the least represented live. So Maiden themselves isn't putting this out there, but it's a definite listen. And again, I had the same experience you did in probably reverse. I loved it for the longest time. And then I let it sit for a while, and then having revisited everything over and over and over, I went back to this and had some issues.
But yeah, there you go. Somewhere in Time. Stay tuned for Seventh Son of the Seventh Son coming out next week. Peter, is there anything going on around your end? Contrarians, Grant, anything?
Oh, we've always put the links down below. Just go ahead and check them out. I'm on a lot of stuff. I've got 2, 4, 6, 7 podcasts this week. So
yeah. Okay.
I'll be busy. So the holiday break is over, and just, check the links that we have down below. And obviously your participation and your watching and liking, subscribing is very much appreciated. And we do this so people can watch and leave their comments and
absolutely
enjoy doing that. So
absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you guys know what to do. Check the description down below. Bunch of channels are going to be linked down there. So just, check it below. You're watching LP Tremors, and stay tuned for more Iron Maiden discussions. As I mentioned, we're going to be going over the full discography from 1980 to 2021 Senjutsu. Next week is Seventh Son. So stay tuned. Friday the 13th, I'm still doing that with my buddies Ron Gavalier and Davey Gallagher. We're going to be going over Jason X this coming Friday. So stay tuned if you are a Friday the 13th fan. Other than that, not a whole lot going on my end. Probably will be doing some spur of the moment stuff. But other than that, I just put out my top 10 records of 2022. So be sure to check that out. And that's pretty much it. As I mentioned, just comment down below your thoughts of Somewhere in Time or Iron Maiden in general. We would love to read them. And as always, up the irons, stay metal, stay scared. Bye, guys.
Yeah.